This is Mr. Hannon, and welcome to What the Format. Today we're going to go over linear inequalities. Now, there are two types of linear inequalities. First type is just your normal one variable equation. You'll notice that it's very similar to a one variable equation. These are often one step, two step, or they'll call it multi-step equations. That's when they'll throw in your distributed property, your commutative or associative property, some other simplification you might need to do before you go into the solving process. Linear inequalities work the same way as these linear equations. Now, why do I say there's two types? Well, remember y equals mx plus b is a linear equation. You also have linear inequalities with linear equations, so now you would have two variables, okay? These are one variable equations and inequalities. They still call those linear, okay? So, here we go. We're going to solve this. This should be reviewed, hopefully, if you know how to solve your equations. We're going to do reverse PEMDAS when we solve. We're going to undo the addition subtraction first. So we're going to subtract 8 from both sides, because what you do to one side, you do to the other. You're going to get negative 3x equals 24. Then we're going to divide by negative 3, because the inverse of multiplying by negative 3 is dividing by negative 3. Those cancel. You get x equals negative 8. Now be careful here. Positive over negative is a negative. I see a lot of students sometimes miss that, and they'll put positive 8. You need to be very careful with that. Sign changes are the number one thing in algebra. Now, how is this different? Well, there are two differences to the inequalities versus the equations. First difference is when I subtract 8, well, nothing happens, so that's not really a difference, is it? That looks the same to me. Okay, so then we get negative 3x less than 24. Now, we're going to divide by negative 3. Well, when you divide by negative with an inequality, there's the first difference. You have to flip or switch the direction of the inequality. Well, why is that? Well, let's take a look at the number line. I've got 0 here, 2 and 3. 3 is greater than 2. I go on to the other side, negative 2 and negative 3. Negative 3 is now less than negative 2. Notice that when we cross 0 here, which happens when both sides change signs, the inequality naturally flips. Okay. Now there are 4 times when we switch the inequality. The first one is right here, when you either divide or multiply by a negative number. Now please be careful. The number we're checking is this number on the x, not this number here. If I have 2x is less than negative 6 and I divide by 2, this does not count as dividing by negative. Please understand that. The number on the x is the one that we're looking at. That's the one that has to be negative. And when you divide or multiply by negative, recall that causes a sign change. Negatives, when you multiply or divide by negative, become positive. Positives, when you multiply by or divide by negative, become negative. And since we're doing it to both sides, we're causing the sign change on both sides. That causes the inequality to flip. Other than that, solving is the same. Now, this has one solution. We don't normally put this on a number line. But with inequalities, oftentimes, the second difference is they're going to add the number line. So we're going to have to come over here, put our minus 8, put an open circle, and go to the right. Now, please remember that open circles are for greater than or less than. So if I have less than or greater than, I'm going to have an open circle. If I have less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, I'm going to have a closed circle. Now, the other thing is, remember, less than, that's to the left. Less than or equal to is the left. Greater than is to the right. Greater than or equal to is also to the right. Now, that's only true when the variable is on the left side. So what happens if you're solving your equation and you get something like this? Minus 2 is less than or equal to x. Okay? Well, you can put the x on the left side just like you would in a normal equation. Recall that if we had minus 2 equals x, we could just write x equals negative 2. The symmetric property allows us to do that. There's no difference between the two. You can do this here, but please notice that this needs to flip with it. Okay? X has to be still greater than or equal to negative 2. So you notice the greater than is facing the x. That has to still be the same. So those are 2 times right now that you would take the inequality and switch it. When you either multiply or divide by a negative, or when you switch sides of the variable. Now, as long as the variable is on the left side, this works. Follow the point. Point left, point right. Or you can memorize less than, L, is left. Greater than, GR, R, less than, left, greater than are right. So you could also memorize it that way. However, I don't advise ever trying to deal with this. Maybe you can handle it. My brain just doesn't like that. I'm going to make mistakes if I do that. And one of the things I'm trying to teach you is what the format is, to learn how you need to think through the problem so you get the answer right most of the time. If you can handle this with no problems and you remember less than left, greater than right, and you can see that there, that's fine. That's great. Do it that way. But be aware that maybe that won't work for you. Be open to thinking of new ways to do things. And maybe the way I'm showing you doesn't work. Maybe you have to think of something else. That's okay. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what the rules are and how to follow them. And then you start there and you play with it till you find your own system. That's what I did. My teacher taught me. I saw what he did. I had to tweak a few things until they worked for me, and it was great. But 90% of what I do, my teacher taught me. There's only about 10% I had to change to fit what my brain does. Okay, and this is inequalities. Now, again, they call it linear inequalities because your variable is single. Okay, it's not a linear equation inequality, which would be y equals mx plus b. Of course, in that case, your equal will be replaced by the one of the four inequalities. But we'll get to that later in another video. For now, if you want to call this multi-step inequalities instead of linear equalities, if that makes it easier for you to see, or just linear equalities, but just recognize it's still a single variable. So it's just like these equations with the two differences of that you are going to have to switch the inequality when you multiply or divide by negative, and you have to graph your solution set. And that's what they call this. This is now called your solution set. So please make a note of those two differences. The inequality flips here, that's a third difference, but you don't deal with this that often. So usually I keep that in mind, but I really just think of this as two differences. It makes it easier for me. So I have to watch when I switch the inequality by multiplying or dividing by a negative, and I have to graph my solution set on a number line. Those are typically the two things I have to keep in mind. And now the good news for me then is I know how to do all these. Equations are easy, so now I'm only learning two new things. And that's the other idea with algebra. You're not supposed to be learning something new every time. You're supposed to build on what you already know. What they do is they just keep bringing back what you've learned, but when they bring it back, they add stuff to it. So it's only the 2 or 3 new steps that you're supposed to learn, not the whole thing. Hopefully this is catching you up with some of these videos. You're catching up on some things that you're struggling with. And once you're caught up, learning the new things isn't as daunting, or shouldn't be. Anyway, hopefully this helps with inequalities. Thank you for watching with the format. This has been Mr. Hanna. Happy math.